Well, it was going to be just a regular Monday when we woke up today. And then, like 5:30, 5:45 hit, and we got a breaking piece of news, and my ass woke the frick up. So, hey everyone, welcome to Pucks and Brews. I am your host, Mike Sparacino, alongside, as always, the Shell Master Liam Godimer. And yeah, thank God we didn't record this morning.
I concur. I agree. A
Yeah, I got called into work
lot
early,
of big.
and lo and behold, blessing in disguise. But this is episode 33 of Pucks and Brews. Everyone grab a favorite drink of choice, whether it's coffee, water, beer, vodka, any other type of hard liquor, anything. Pineapple juice, water, orange juice. Pineapple juice is delicious. And yeah, sit back and enjoy some hockey talk. So yeah, yeah, this Monday became hectic, okay?
Yeah. Usually it's the Rangers, right, that come out with the big time Monday news, but instead it's their crosstime rival, the Islanders, instead. But I know we'll get to that. But certainly shocking changes made in the NHL in a
Oh
short
yeah.
time today.
Oh yeah, we will get to that very, very shortly. But I just want to touch on a couple things first. First off, I hope everyone enjoyed you know, yesterday. Well, I mean, technically, by the time we put this out, it's going to be 2 days ago. The NFL playoff games, NFC and AFC championship games, one of which was, frankly, not a very good football game, and the other one was pretty intense. And a lot of people are mad, a lot of people are happy. I'm kind of indifferent. Did you enjoy the games yesterday, Liam?
I certainly did. Bengals Chiefs was, it was expected to be, a nail biter of a game, and it lived up to that for sure. You know, Certainly the referees took as they do in all sports, took a lot of criticism for the way, the outcome of that game ended up going. But congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs going on to the Super Bowl, and conversely, the Philadelphia Eagles putting a beat down on the San Francisco 49ers. So I think it's going to be a good Super Bowl. I think the Chiefs are going to win. Hot take. But I think the Eagles have had a great season, and they've overcome the odds, at least for this early part of the playoff run.
Yeah, I just can't root for Philly sports teams, so I'm rooting for the Chiefs.
You see what they did
So
to the city of Philadelphia after they won the NFC Championship game? There were
no, what
people
did they do?
rioting. I just don't understand that. When your team wins and in celebration, you go and destroy your own city. I don't, partying in the cities and climbing up the poles and just very odd behavior. Only Philadelphia, right?
If a team wins, they should do what my neighborhood does anytime Italy wins a sports championship in soccer.
What do they
Just
do?
go drive around the park, beep horns as much as possible,
Mhm.
and just yell a lot. That's what we do. Yeah,
Makes me
so
miss New York.
it's good for some things. Yeah, so
It
in the
is.
meantime, we also had a Rangers open practice at MSG, which was surprisingly packed. I didn't have a chance to go, but I heard and saw some pictures about it, and great turnout.
Dude, there was 10,000 people there on a weekday.
Whew.
Like, pretty insane, right?
Yeah, I know my
And
friend Ryan went, so he was
you could
hyped.
say what you want. Yeah, it's probably a lot of fun. And, I'm sure the players got into it as well. They were excited to see fans coming out to support them, even in something as insignificant as some may view practice. Allen Iverson, of course.
Hmm. We're talking about practice.
Not talking about the game,
No,
talking
we're
about
talking about
practice.
practice. And they Rangers could still use some more of it, but we'll get back to that. Let's get to the breaking news of the day.
Good.
You broke this to me in a way where I thought the Rangers had traded for either Patty Kane or Timo Meyer. And when you said Bo Horvat, I was just like, oh, it happened. And a split
Hmm.
second later, you said to the Islanders, and I was just like, you're lying. Of
Yeah.
course. Of course, it was to the New York Islanders. But yes, Bo Horvat has been traded to the New York Islanders for Anthony Beauvillier, Aatu Raty, and a 2023 first round pick, which has a condition on it of it's basically a top 12 protected pick in 2023. Do I see it being top 12? No. But This is a very good return for Vancouver, in my opinion. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I see a lot of different people, kind of going on two different sides of the trade. Some people like it for the Islanders, some people like it for the Canucks. And I'll tell you, Shades, at first glance, I really liked it for Vancouver. They bring back a young, albeit inconsistent top six forward. I guess you can consider a third line forward right now in Anthony Beauvillier. He still has some upside, and that's what you're looking for if you're Vancouver. You're looking for controllable players who can turn around their careers maybe in a different location. And I think Anthony Beauvillier fits that billing really well. And as far as Ratu, look, he was a second round pick. He was projected to go in the top 10 in his
He
draft year.
he was at
And
one point a projected first overall pick.
and his stock fell big time. And the Islanders, they took a risk selecting him in the second round. They only had one pick. They did not have a first round pick. They had one second round pick, and they go with a guy, who scouts were kind of not really high on at the time of the draft. And look, he had 2 goals in 9 games. Is that really coming, showing yourself and being like, whoa, I'm a superstar player? No, not really, but, showed some upside. And for a player coming straight out of Finland, into the NHL, I think he acclimated himself quite well. And that first round pick, Shades, I cannot stress this enough. It's a top 12 protected pick. Okay, so if the Islanders are bad enough to where they are picking in the top 12 in this year's draft, then it's an unprotected first round pick in 2024. And who's to say that the Islanders might not be an even worse team next year than they are this year, and that pick is unprotected? And if it ends up being in the top 10 or the top 5, Vancouver just got a lot better. So the risk for me, that makes the trade a little bit better from the Canucks standpoint. And from the Islanders, again, I just don't understand it positionally, right? They have 5 centermen now. If you consider Anders Lee a centerman, they have 6 players that play center. You can say what you want. Okay, Barzal is going to move to Bo Horvat's wing. That's fair, but I just don't know. You got Nelson, true blue center, Pajot, very good two-way center. Barzal, you just signed for 8 years, $9.5 million to be your number one center. Are you paying 8 years, $9.5 million to Matt Barzal to be a top-line winger? I'm not really sure you are based on his production. So a lot of question marks, Shades. I could go on for days. I don't like the move. I don't hate that the Islanders went all in. I hate that they went in all in on a player that they didn't need positionally. Go for a winger. Go for a Bo Horvat. Give up less, prospect-wise, and then maybe you'll be better off in the long term. But Lou Lamoriello, just question marks, Shades. Sorry, the long answer, but had to get it off my chest.
I'm glad you ended it with that because that's exactly what I was going to transition into with Lou Lamoriello and trading for a guy in Bo Horvat who plays a position in which, frankly, like you said, they didn't need. They needed more of a winger. But can they move Barzell? Sure, absolutely. But I mean, you have a guy who you drafted as a center, paid to be a center, and now all of a sudden you're going to move him back to the wing again. It's questionable, very questionable. And if you look at Lou Lamoriello's track record of the salary cap era, it's not really that good if you think about it, because just off the top of my head, the Devils in 2011-12 made the Stanley Cup final. That was when they had Kovalchuk and Parise and just honestly a very, very good team. And then that team immediately fell off because a bunch of players left. Lamoriello really wasn't able to get the Devils back on track after that. He goes to the Maple Leafs, a team that, frankly, hasn't been able to get out of the first round, even though he did draft some key guys for them, aka, Marner. And I think he drafted Matthews. I think he was still the GM at that point. I could be very wrong on that, but he drafted guys. I'm pretty sure he drafted Marner and Nylander. But that's basically been Kyle Dubas's team for a while now. Haven't been able to get out of the first round. Now he's on to the Islanders, who I will give the Islanders credit. They made back-to-back Eastern Conference Finals in 2020 and 2021 in the playoffs. And you can say what you want about Lou Lamoriello, but the fact of the matter is he didn't build either one of those teams. The infrastructure was there player-wise. He just hired the coach.
And then he fired the coach.
Well, yeah, he fired the first guy to bring in Barry Trotz, and now Barry Trotz is gone and the team fell off. So just my opinion. And I think decent chunk of people would agree. He's been a very overrated GM in the salary cap era because as soon as a team of his falls off, he has shown that he has not been able to get things back on track.
I totally agree with you. And the one positive that you mentioned, Shades, was the fact that he has a pretty good draft record, right? With the Maple Leafs getting Marner, Nylander, he hit on a couple of first rounders. Guess what? The Islanders haven't had a first round pick 4 straight years after this year, if that pick is not in the top 12. So if he's not drafting, what positives is he bringing to the table? Because clearly he's got an outdated mindset, in terms of what this team really needs. He signs Kyle Palmieri to a long-term contract. Is that something the Islanders needed? Absolutely not. And there were a couple marginal moves there that kind of have you scratching your head. Romanov, I like Romanov, but again, was that an acquisition that you really need to make? Horvat, like we just said, positionally, was that necessary? It really wasn't. So I just don't think he's in the right state of mind. I just think he's just old and he's just has poor decision making. And I think that started at the end of his tenure with the Devils, continued when he was with the Maple Leafs, and is finally finishing up in his time with the Islanders. And I think they're going to move on from him in the offseason when they have the chance. I think, and look, credit to Lou Lamoriello, right? General managers have two bullets. One of them is a big trade, and the other one is firing a coach before they get fired themselves. And Lou Lamoriello already fired the coach, hired a new one, and it's backfired. So this was his big trade. And if it doesn't work out, I cannot foresee any scenario in which the front office of the Islanders and the ownership group is okay with bringing him back another season to operate things in the front office. I don't know how you feel about that, but that's just how I see it.
Well, I'm glad you said outdated mindset because a lot of Islanders fans, including like close friends of mine, they agree that they're not huge on Lamoriello either, because even they see the puzzling moves that he's made over his tenure with the Islanders. And I did not know that they haven't had a first round pick the last 3 years.
That's right. And let's call a spade a spade. They were only as good as they were during the 2020 and 2021 season because of Barry Trotz and the system that they implemented. Look, it was bubble hockey. You want to say that it's a fake championship. I'm not going to agree with that. But what I will say is that it's a different style that you have to play. It's really hard forechecking hockey, and the Islanders played that better than anybody else during that run. And in 2021, the same thing. And once they fired Trotz and once they went towards a little bit more of an offensive game, it was over from there. It's not a discredit to Lane Lambert. It's a credit to Barry Trotz and how, like I've said many times, Shades, the best coach in the NHL is sitting on the sidelines at home in Winnipeg, right? He's from Winnipeg?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Now, just to transition back to Bo Horvat for a second, the Islanders and Lou Lamoriello did, in fact, trade for this guy, as somebody in my fantasy league picks up Ivan Barbashev, better by Barbashev. So he trades for Bo Horvat, whose career high in points is 61, which came during the 2018-2019 season, where he had 27 goals and 34 assists in a full 82 game season. Then, obviously, COVID hit the next 2 years, where he had 53 points in 69 games. Nice. And 39 points in 56 games. And last year, in 70 games, he had 52 points, posting his first 30-goal season, where he finished with 31 goals and 21 assists. And that stat sheet is almost replicated up to this point this year. He has 31 goals again so far this year, with 23 assists for 54 points in 49 games this year. So if you go based on his career average up to this point, he's not a point per game player. And my whole question is this who Bo Horvat is now? Or is this just a somewhat flash in the pan because he knew his contract was coming up? That's going to be the real question moving forward, because you can look at a bunch of guys who have had big years in contract years, and then they never really replicated that same success. Before I throw it back to you, I just want to, not that I'm comparing the two players in any way based on how they play or the situation that they're in, but I look at a guy like Patrick Kane, who they got an absolute mega deal, $10.5 million a year. And early in his career, he wasn't a bad point per game type player where the point per game rate wasn't bad, but it wasn't necessarily great. And then he had that one great year where people said, "Oh, he might not stay at this level." And then he did. So, what are your thoughts on Bo Horvat as a player?
I don't think you can compare Bo Horvat and Patrick Kane in regard to your comparison. I just don't think they're similar enough players. I don't think that you can foresee a jump from 50 points he might get 75, 80 points at the end of this season. He's got 54 points in 49 games. I'm not trying to discount him at all, but to say that he's going to be like Patrick Kane, put up an 80-point season this year and then continue to do that years on end, I just don't see that. I just don't think he's that type of player. I think a better comparison is Nazem Kadri, who was just an unrestricted free agent at the end of last year. A leader kind of guy, plays with grit, again, just a really team-oriented guy. He got paid, $7.5 million by the Flames. He just had his career year where he put up, 75, 80 points with the Avalanche, won the Stanley Cup. But before that, he was putting up Bo Horvat type numbers, 45 plus points a season. So I think that's the better comparison for me. And for the Islanders, I think they're damned if they do, and they're damned if they don't. And what I mean by that is re-signing Bo Horvat. Because if you re-sign Bo Horvat, what's the entire reason Horvat was traded by Vancouver in the first place? Because they committed to JT Miller before signing him in the offseason. And they're like, well, we have two number one centers, and we're not going to pay two number one centers $7.5 to $9 million a season. So they committed to Miller and traded Bo Horvat. Like I just said, the Islanders just signed Barzal by $9.5 million. So now they had the same problem that Canucks wanted to avoid. So now they have $18 million almost if they sign Bo Horvat to about $7.5 million to $8 million locked up in two players. And that's not even counting the $7.5 million that Anders Lee makes, the $5.5 million that Josh Bailey makes, the $5.5 million that Kyle Palmieri makes, the $6 million that Semyon Varlamov makes. Tons of dead cap on this team. And I think Bo Horvat, at least not initially, in the latter years of his contract, if he signs with the Islanders, could be like Bailey is now, like Palmieri is now, like Anders Lee is becoming, even though he's the captain of the team. So risky for this Islanders team. Very.
Yeah, the only reason I brought up Patrick Kane is because he was a player whose career had a similar type of career in regards to at least up to this point, where he wasn't a bad point producer, but he wasn't necessarily in a top five, kind of like he became. The only reason I brought that up is because he's just a guy that came to mind where he wasn't too much of a point producer. Then he had that 1 year and then kind of stayed at that level after he made that significant jump. I probably should have brought up a guy like Brad Marchand because he had a similar type of career where he wasn't a huge point getter, then had that one big year, and then he stayed at that level after he rose to that level.
Marchand, I think, is a much better comparison.
Yeah,
sure.
I should have.
Patrick is a very good one.
Yeah, I should have.
Think he was
I should have made that. Should have clarified that a little more.
Yeah, no, definitely. I agree with you. And he was a number one overall pick. And look, going back to what you said about him getting paid $10.5 million on his first long-term contract extension, I think as much of it had to do with the points he was producing. Also, by that point, he had won two Stanley Cups by that point,
I think
three Stanley Cups by that point. So, that goes into it as well. And that's something that Bo Horvat just doesn't have. Very good leader. He's a captain, but it's not like he's been a part of Stanley Cup winning teams. And when general managers look at acquiring players and subsequently extending them, it's a big factor because general managers want to win.
Yeah, but
and
you
as
definitely
crazy as Lou isn't over the hill as he might be, he still wants to win. At least I hope. If I'm an Islanders fan, my goodness.
If you're an Islanders fan, you got to hope that this move works out because it has this move has very boom bust potential, in my opinion.
Agreed. And, I do want to put this out there, Shades, and I want to, it's a crazy idea. It may sound crazy right now on the night that the Islanders acquire Bo Horvat. But I think if Lou Lamoriello, by the trade deadline, sees that his team is not within striking distance of the playoffs, what if they trade Bo Horvat? What if they flip him themselves? Now, I'm not sure if they'd get, as much as Aatu, Raty, Anthony Beauvillier in a first round pick. But if he puts up, let's just say 20 points in his first 12 games with the Islanders, drives the price up, the Islanders are out of the playoffs, and Lou Lamoriello can try to recoup some assets. So just don't take that out of the question, as crazy as it sounds.
Because you brought that up, I'm going to bring up all the teams in the hunt for wild card spots, including the two teams that are currently holding the wild card spots. The Washington Capitals have 58 points in 52 games. Pittsburgh Penguins have 57 points in 49 games. The Buffalo Sabres have 56 points in 49 games, which good for them. I'm happy they're finally starting to rise from, basically irrelevancy. The New York Islanders currently have 55 points in 52 games. So they are 3 points behind the Capitals with the same amount of games played. But the two teams ahead of them in the Penguins and Sabres both have 3 games in hand with a points lead. And the Florida Panthers have 54 points in 52 games. And I have to mention this just because the Philadelphia Flyers have 51 points in 51 games, crawling literally out of basically a 10-foot hole that they were in earlier in the season. So this has become a very, very intriguing Eastern Conference wildcard race. I just had to put that out there because you brought that up.
No, I'm with you. And that makes it even tougher for the Islanders to get back into things. When they don't have those games in hand, like teams like you mentioned that the Penguins do, and others. And look, the Flyers, I'll give them their credit. They have been playing John Tortorella branded hockey. He has that team committed to defense, and Carter Hart, for the first time in his career, is playing in front of a defense that's actually good enough, to actually help him along and make sure that he's not left out to dry the entire 60 minutes, and he's having a much better season. Good for Philadelphia. I hope they don't make the playoffs, but I hope that they don't get Connor Bedard either. So, kind of in that middle thing. But as far as the Eastern Conference playoff race, look, the Penguins are falling off big time. The Capitals, same thing. I'm not sold on either of them. The Islanders, I think, have an opportunity to jump over those two teams. But like you said, the Panthers, they won the President's Trophy last year. And you know what? It's taking a little bit of time to get that chemistry. Matthew Tkachuk, a new top line forward with the team. It's going to take a while. And the Buffalo Sabres, Shades, you said it. You're happy for them. I mean, look, they have Rasmus Dahlin, Owen Power on the back end. They got good goaltending in Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, and also a 42-year-old Craig Anderson who's kind of rejuvenated his career. And Tage Thompson just might be my favorite player in the NHL. So, and Don Granato is a good coach too. So,
absolutely.
They got a good thing going on over there.
Yeah, and man, we've hit on a lot of different aspects in this trade, but let's all circle back to what Vancouver gets in this trade. Did they win it at the time of this trade? Did they get good value? What are your thoughts?
Yes, I think they got good value. I don't think it was a fleece, but I think that they won this trade. I think they got a first round pick. They got a young player with upside, and they got a prospect that was once highly touted and was looked at as a potential number one overall pick and looked pretty good in 9 NHL games. So if I'm a Vancouver fan, I wouldn't be upset. Look deeper than the numbers. That's what I would suggest. And it's a player they weren't going to bring back anyway. Now, would the right decision have been not to sign JT Miller, trade him after his 99-point season, get better assets than you got in this deal, and extend Horvat as your captain? Yeah, that probably would have been better, but hindsight is 2020. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, and just to talk on the Vancouver side of this, they got good value for a player that they made it very clear that they weren't going to sign because of a stupid decision made beforehand in the JT Miller contract. And they get a young Aatu Raty who is currently 20 years old, a guy who basically had top 5 draft potential at one point, and is honestly, he's not looking like a total bust at the moment. Getting him in the second round like they did, he can develop into a nice piece for them. And if he does, this trade is going to look even worse for the Islanders. Anthony Beauvillier is currently 25 and he has a career high of 39 points. Like you said earlier, he's struggled a little bit because of the inconsistencies. But to get basically a middle six winger who can put up around 15 goals a season, that's not bad. Especially
It's
with
not
the
bad.
especially with the situation that the Vancouver Canucks are currently in. And now we're kind of you know how we were questioning Jim Rutherford's comments in the press conference last week or 2 episodes ago?
I
This
do.
this kind of trade actually, it makes him look not like a total idiot, which I didn't think was
Yeah.
possible.
He said he wanted young players back with upside, and he got two. And he got a first round pick in a draft that is pretty loaded. And you know what? There's also, like I said, there's that risk that this pick is in the top 12 and it becomes unprotected in 2024. But there's also the chance that the Islanders get the 14th pick, the 13th pick. And if they do, this draft class is loaded. So it could turn into a really nice, package of prospect for a player that you weren't going to bring back anyway. I know it stings if you're the Canucks fans right now because they traded away their captain, but as far as the players that they got in the future that they have, along with extending on Andrei Kuzmenko, that we'll talk about a little bit later on in the show, probably,
Oh yeah.
the future looks a lot brighter than it looked, 2 weeks ago. And like you said, Jim Rutherford looks a little less idiotic than he did initially, but still idiotic nonetheless.
Yeah, I just keep referring back to his tenure in Pittsburgh, and that speaks for itself. So yeah, basically Horvat gets traded to the Islanders for a pretty nice package. We talked about Lamoriello, the coaching decisions, yada yada yada. We covered basically every single aspect of this trade that we could possibly cover. And well, we're both Ranger fans, so I hope this doesn't work out for the Islanders.
I don't think it will. I don't think it will, Shades, to be honest with you. Again, damned if they do, damned if they don't. If they re-sign them, they're going to be in a salary cap crunch to where they're not going to be able to add, another superstar player. Because again, remember last offseason, the last two off seasons, actually, three, if you count the Artemi Panarin one, they were trying to go for the star player and they missed out. They missed out on Panarin, they missed out on Landeskog, and they missed out on Gaudreau last year. And now they bring in Horvat, and suddenly, if you extend him by 8 by 8.5, that's your big fish. And if another one comes along in the UFA pool, Lou Lamoriello or whoever the general manager is going to be at that time is not going to have enough money to bring them in and significantly change the roster. So if it works, great. But if it doesn't, and they are stuck with Bo Horvat at the term that they might be if they have to extend them, oh my goodness, this could be a rough next couple of years for this Islanders team, coming off of 2 out of the last 3 years where they were really successful.
Yeah, no, definitely gonna keep a very close eye on how this trade develops, and gonna be fascinating. So
But
let's,
also,
yeah, go ahead.
can I say one more thing about this trade, just real quick?
Yeah,
I
go
don't
for
want to
it.
discount the Islanders either. They got a really good player in Bo Horvat here, a really good leader, somebody who's going to come into the locker room and is going to significantly change the trajectory of this lineup. They look a little bit flat, they look a little bit old and slow at times. I think Bo Horvat is going to change that. I think on a team that had a lot of dark spots on the Vancouver Canucks, he was one of the shining lights, and I think that's going to translate well to the Islanders. Remember, they're bringing in a captain, they're bringing in a character guy, and they're bringing in a player who's on a career season. So I just, I don't want this discussion to end without it being known that the Islanders, albeit how it looks from a long-term and short-term perspective, they did get the best player in this trade right now, and we should mention that.
That's definitely a fair and good, very good point. They did get the best player involved in the trade. Now, Aatu Raty, if he develops and becomes a player similar to Horvat, whoo, gonna
And
be very bad.
this Finnish elite league that these players are coming out of, your Kaapo Kakko, your Aatu, your Jesse Puyarvi, they produce pretty good two-way players. They might not be those offensive standout flashy forwards that get out of North America and Canada and Sweden, but really good on the defensive side of the puck. And that's one of the shining spots of Ratu's game. So, again, just a player that helps in all three zones.
Yeah. And one last thing. If the draft pick is this year, Vancouver's putting themselves in a very good position to get some good young players.
Then they could very well get the best player in the trade.
Yep.
That first round pick is a wild card for sure.
Yeah. All draft picks are wild cards. And yeah. All right. So let's stay on the Vancouver Canucks for 1 second. We talked about this an episode or two ago. Andrei Kuzmenko. He was not traded. He was re-signed for 2 years at a $5.5 million cap hit. That was a kind of surprising, but I think he deserved that contract for the way he's played this season, and good on them. They were able to keep a player that they wanted at a pretty good cap hit too.
Yeah, it shows that the Canucks didn't want to tear it down, at least completely. They still wanted to keep around the young player who's coming and, again, played really well on both sides of the puck. And Kuzmenko, coming out of Russia, 27-year-old forward. He's having a career year this season, at least going back to his KHL days as well. $5.5 million. He shined really well on this Canucks team that's quite frankly struggled. You could look at it two ways, right? You could look at it that the Canucks should have sold high on Kuzmenko and gotten, some draft picks back. But what? They sign him for 2 years. They keep him around. They show commitment to the player so that, after that 2 years ends and he's a superstar player, he looks at the Canucks and says, you know what? They kept that belief in me. They didn't trade me when they were going through that retool. They didn't get younger assets back. Instead, they decided to extend me, give me a chance to make more money, let me re-sign with this team. So I think it was a good deal for the player and team, which we don't see a lot.
Yeah, we really don't. It's actually pretty uncommon, which is surprising. But hey, teams want to buy out UFA years, so that jumps the price right there.
And I also think it signals that the Canucks aren't going into a full-on rebuild. I think with players like Raty, Beauvillier, Kuzmenko, they're, kind of forming, a nice young forward group, for next season and beyond. So I think with some marginal moves, maybe they can get themselves, back to a place where they're competing, more regularly.
Yeah, time will tell. Time will tell. And well, retools can vary pretty greatly in length. So depending on further moves made, they could be back in relevancy in the playoffs in 2 years. Could take them another 6 or 7. Only time will tell. So speaking of a contract extension in Andrei Kuzmenko, let's talk about some other ones that have happened within the last 2 weeks. Pavel Zacha signed a 4-year deal with a cap hit of $4.75 million with the Boston Bruins. And this was a guy who honestly was looking like kind of a reach when the Devils drafted him after a couple years in Jersey. But he seems to have found a nice home for himself in Boston.
6th overall pick, 2015. He's got 33 points in 50 games with Boston. And I think this extension is a case of, well, everything has worked right in Boston this season, so we might as well keep everybody around that has led to that change. And Pavel Zacha for Erik Haula was one of those underrated trades, I think, before the season started that not a lot of people were really talking about. And I think Haula has been pretty good for the Devils, and I think Zacha has been even better for the Bruins. So I think $4.75 million, I think that might be a little bit much for a player that has 212 points in 436 career games. If you look at what he put up last season, 36 points in 70 games, 35 points in 50 games in 2020, 32 points in 65 points the year before, in 65 games rather, the year before that. So he's not a great defensive forward either, although he's been a plus 14 on this Bruins team, which is by far the best of his career. So again, the Bruins are paying him for a career season. Everything has worked in Boston, so I can't really criticize a move that's been, quite frankly, critical to their success this season. And Pavel Zacha has been that.
Yeah, and this is also his 8th season in the league. So he kind of is what he is at this point.
Yeah,
I would say.
So. I mean, again, he's going to break his career high in points. He's probably going to be a 50-point player.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. Could be.
Could be one of those players. I'm, again, not a superstar player, but again, has a career season and, plays out the rest of his contract quite well. Conversely, he could be overpaid to all hell. So you never know.
Yeah.
With these things. But he's been really good for Boston this year.
Yeah, speaking of another big contract extension, Matthew Boldy and the Minnesota Wild, 7 years, 7 million per. Now, Matthew Boldy is currently 21 and has one full season. Actually, no, not even. Has, what is it, 95 NHL games under his belt and has a grand total of 75 points. So I actually really liked Boldy in that draft. So this could actually end up being a very fair contract for him.
Shades has been pretty close to a point per game player, but 39 points in 47 games last year, 36 points in 48 games this season. Again, he's going to reach his career high. $7 million. Is that a little bit much at this point in his career? I would say yes, but I think the Minnesota Wild are looking at this from a perspective that they want to extend the player for what he is going to become rather than what he is. And I liked him in his draft year too, but Shades, I'm not sure if you remember when the Rangers went to Minnesota this season, but Matt Boldy was very impressive in that game, a standout forward. And you can just tell, that regardless of how this contract looks in the next few years, he's going to be a really good player. And he's one of the best young players in the league, for sure.
Oh, absolutely. No, he's only got room to grow because he was, what did I just say? He was drafted in 2019 and he was taken 12th overall.
Right.
Yeah, and he's currently 21. There's still a lot of upside to be had here. So this contract could end up being a steal. You never know until guys hit that like age 23, 24 season. That's when they really start to show their true colors.
But if I were to put in a prediction, I think Matt Boldy, outside of Kirill Kaprizov, has a chance to be the face of the Minnesota Wild.
Yes.
At some point in his career. I know Kaprizov is locked up for a long time, but you never know how things are going to shake out. I think Boldy, the Wild at least see him as a 21-year-old forward, a homegrown prospect drafted within the organization. I think that he's destined for success, and $7 million is going to look like a steal by 2025, 2026.
Yeah, I think I'm going to agree with you on this one. So we forgot to bring this up last episode. Or I should really say 2 episodes ago because last episode was kind of an emergency recording and we stuck to one topic for good reason. But the Rangers gave Jimmy Vesey a 2-year contract extension, as well as Ben Harpur, who was 4 days ago at the time of recording. Vesey was almost a month ago at this point, but Harpur is basically a 6th/7th defenseman. To get him for less than $800,000 cap hit, that's kind of exactly what you want to be paying for a fringe 6th defenseman, 7th defenseman. And Jimmy Vesey, who's actually he's been all right this year. 3rd-line guy, 4th-line guy, on pace for his Rangers career averages of 16 or 17 goals.
Shades, that Jimmy Vesey contract is the best on the team. I think it is the best contract on the team. Jimmy Vesey has been one of the best defensive forwards in the NHL. If he could just score a little bit more, he would be a prime Selke candidate. You look at his advanced statistics card, his defense is literally 99. Literally 99. He's been one of the best, like a top 5 defensive forward in the league. And the fact that the Rangers locked him up for 2 years under $1 million, it's a credit to Chris Drury, for bringing back a player, that nobody really wanted, right? He had his time with the Devils, didn't really showcase much there, showcased a little bit of the defensive player that he would end up becoming with the Rangers, but not enough for New Jersey to keep him around. He goes back to the team that brought him in, from Harvard, right? Brought him in out of Harvard. And he's been just really outstanding. And for Vesey to come in during training camp and not have a spot secured on this roster and make himself a consistent 2nd, 3rd line, 4th line player on this team, it's a credit to him as well, and for his work ethic. And I'm very happy to have him around. And also, Shades, Ben Harpur. If you look at Ben Harpur's advanced stats card, it shows a bunch of zeros. But what I will say is I think You can look past the advanced analytics a little bit when it comes to Harpur. He's been a serviceable sixth, seventh defenseman. And again, this is a guy that career might have been over last year during the offseason after his time with New Jersey. Ben Harpur actually said in his press conference after signing the extension, I almost thought about quitting hockey during this offseason previous. And now he gets signed to a 2-year deal by Chris Drury. I think he's been very good with the Rangers. I think he's paired quite well with Braden Schneider, and I think he's been able to teach him some things on the third pair as well. So I think he is what Justin Braun was after the trade deadline, maybe a little bit more effective. And I think it was a good signing, as many people online might criticize it. So
Yeah, I'm just like solely with Harpur. I'm comparing him to how Patrick Nemeth was, and this is an upgrade.
do you think he's an upgrade from Justin Braun?
Too early to tell. Too early to tell. Ask me that question again at the end of the season.
I will. I will.
Yeah, and speaking of VC, he's actually, believe it or not, 9 goals and 8 assists for 17 points in 48 games so far this season. So he is actually, he might hit career highs in both goals and assists. He might not, because his high is 17 and 18 respectively for goals and assists. He currently has 9 and 8, and they have 6 games, minus 6 games of half a season. So they have 35 games. No, they have 34 games left in the season. So has VC been good? Yes. Has he been phenomenal offensively? I also can't scream yes, because I mean he's on pace for the numbers that he previously put up with the Rangers, which aren't eye-popping. See what you understand what I'm saying?
His defensive numbers, though, Shades.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
no, that's Oh no,
it outweighs
he's
his
gotten
offensive defense, in my
absolutely no,
opinion.
he's gotten significantly better defensively, which is a good reason to bring him back as a lower lineup guy. Which
Right.
hoping, I'm hoping he kind of stays lower in the lineup, but that's a different story.
I hope we're not in a place where Gerard Galant needs to insert a player who deserves to be in the bottom six, or is just, no, I shouldn't say that, better fit to be in the bottom six, because there's a lack of depth in the top six. But again, we'll talk about that.
Okay, yeah, we will. But Ben Harpur and Jimmy Vesey, 2-year contract extensions with the Rangers. And
What would you grade them?
um
Both.
I would probably say at this time the Harpur extension B minus, VC B plus, maybe A minus.
I think it's an A+ deal for Chris Drury on Jimmy Vesey. I really, really do. I think he might make the difference in the playoffs. Just they use that forward that they were missing. Just at least defensively in that third and fourth line to go toe to toe. With those Patrick Maroon type players against the Lightning and stuff like that. So I give that an A. And as far as Ben Harpur, again, too early to tell. But I think he deserves a B. I think he's been pretty good. And again, it might be a little bit premature, based on what he's produced earlier in his career. But for what he's done with the Rangers, I think it's been a nice move.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So let's move on to some other things. I swear, like that Horvat news basically threw the entire format, or I should say, sequence of format that we wrote up on our phones, just threw it right out the window, because that just changed everything. So let's bring up some injuries real quick. Max Pacioretty and Cole Caufield, both out for the rest of the season. And I feel so bad for Pacioretty. He just comes back from a torn Achilles. He plays, for 2 weeks and tears the same Achilles again? That's
He
rough.
was on the power play with a minute 13 left in the game, in a game that was already put away by Carolina. And it was a play where there was no contact. He just tore his Achilles, the same Achilles that he was coming back from, like you mentioned. And now he's out for the rest of the season. I don't put this on Rod Brindamore, but I just say, why is he out there in the first place when your team is up multiple goals on the power play. He's a top line power play player anyway. I mean, I guess I understand it a little bit. You want to get him back into the groove, but again, unlucky non-contact injury for a player that is in the latter stages of his career. And Shades, I know that Pacioretty's been a warrior, throughout his entire time in the NHL, but coming back from 2 straight torn Achilles in the same foot, I just don't know. At age, what, 35, 36?
I'm gonna check that right now just to confirm.
Let me also say Vegas kind of has their ass saved with 2 straight trades where they didn't get any assets in return. Marc-Andre Fleury, kind of didn't really do much after going off to Chicago, and he's kind of been middling, or his career's kind of taken a downturn with Minnesota. And now the same thing here with Max Pacioretty. So,
And Pacioretty is currently 34, will not be 35 until November. I think the only saving grace with him is that
yeah.
it came on the same leg, believe it or not.
You think that's a good thing?
Yeah, because if it happened to the other leg, I mean, you're talking about both legs basically needing to be surgically repaired. One leg, you still have one healthy leg, and you've already been through the process. So you know exactly what to expect, and you know basically exactly what to do to get back healthy because it's the same, it's the same exact injury.
And, a big part of the recovery process for that injury is kind of a lot of waiting around. And, you can't really come back early from it. And I'm not blaming Max Pacioretty coming back earlier. I'm not saying that the training staff with the Hurricanes, handled it a little bit differently or a little bit prematurely than they probably should have. But, just saying him re-injuring it in that close proximity to when he returned from the lineup, I think the Hurricanes are going to wait a lot longer this time around. The next time we see Max Pacioretty could be a while.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't be surprised if we see him. It's currently January. That's about an 8 to 9 month on average injury to come back from. He might be out until I would say December, just to make sure that he doesn't have a setback or anything. I would hold him
Oh,
out a couple
yeah.
extra weeks, probably an extra month and a half, just to make sure that he's as healthy as possible.
I would say February. I would I
Really?
would wait. I would wait. Yeah. Especially since it's the same foot.
Hmm.
I Yeah, that's just kind of where I'm at with it. I would not. Again, the Hurricanes could handle it differently. I respect your opinion with it, but I think if Max Pacioretty comes back even a little bit prematurely and tears his Achilles a third time, his career's over. So they got to be super. And I think Pacioretty is a player that they want to keep around.
Hmm.
So I don't think that it's necessarily something of the case of, okay, his career is done, let's just cast off the player. I think it's the Hurricanes realize that his talent and his top line ability is something they really need to get over the hump, and it's really a shame that they're not going to have him for the playoffs, because that's a big reason why they acquired him in the first place.
Well, and I also look at it this way. The Hurricanes have actually played pretty well without him. So they're able to put his cap hit back on LTIR and don't count them out of a big move at the deadline.
I'm totally with you. I think they're going to be in on Timo Meyer. I thought they were going to be in on Bo Horvat. They could be an
Not anymore.
interesting landing. Yeah, not anymore. I think they could be an interesting landing spot for Brock Besser.
Ooh, actually, yeah, that would
They
be a
wouldn't have
fit.
to give up. They wouldn't have to give up a lot. This is a proven goal scorer. He's somebody who can slot in to that spot where Max Pacioretty originally was before the injury, at least, the 2 week span that he was in the lineup. But again, like many teams in the NHL, Shades, teams need top line forwards, and Carolina is one of them. So I think with the Rangers, with the Devils, with the Avalanche, with all these teams that are going to look to bring in, a star player, they're all going to be in that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, and like we mentioned, or I mentioned earlier, Cole Caufield out for the season for the Canadians, who are in a very different position from where the Hurricanes are. But it's a huge blow to them because he was by far their best player.
Yeah, he was having a really nice season. And it came out afterwards. I think in an interview, Caufield revealed that he separated his shoulder not once but twice. It was a game against Nashville, and then another game that I can't remember off the top of my head. He popped it back in both times, but when you do that, especially the same shoulder, again, like we were talking about with the torn Achilles, you just need to get surgery at that point. And I think Caufield, unlike Pacioretty, you're just like, nope, you pack it up. The Canadians, they're not competing this season. There's no reason for Cole Caufield to play out the rest of the year, on an injured shoulder. And the fact that he's getting surgery is a good thing long term. And that's what the Canadians should be focusing on. So good move.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Unfortunate, but good move.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on, let's give a special shout out to Ryan Miller, who had his jersey retired by the Sabres over the last 2 weeks since we recorded a regularly scheduled episode, I should say. Good on him, man. He deserves it. One of the greatest American goalies that there's been. And it is unfortunate that he had to spend those couple of years on the just absolutely dreadful Sabres.
Yeah, it was well deserved that Ryan Miller's number was retired. One of the best, like you said, Shades, American goalies of all time. And he was really a pioneer, during, the early 2010s. And, although his career kind of fell off a little bit and he had a little bit of a premature retirement with the Anaheim Ducks, I think, a little bit more was expected of him, later on in his career. But during the early portions, he was as dominant as any in the league. And he was a real staple for, like you said, Shades, a Buffalo Sabres franchise that didn't go through a lot of success. And Ryan Miller, again, was a shining light, in a lot of seasons where, it wasn't as bright. So good for Miller, good for the team. And I remember, right, it was a couple of years ago that the Sabres brought in a backup goaltender and gave them Ryan Miller's number. And Sabres fans freaked out and was like, how are you going to give him his number? It's not retired yet. So, the Sabres did right by the player there, and a well-deserved honor. And I believe they won that game too, where they retired his number. So that's always a good thing.
Yeah, that's a theme that the Rangers don't have. But I digress.
They lost Hanks, right? Against Minnesota.
Oh yeah, of course they did. Of course they did. Yeah, but just
are we really surprised?
Yeah, I'm actually happy that Buffalo traded Miller to the Blues in 2014 because they gave him a legitimate shot with a playoff team. And well, I mean, they ran into the Blues unfortunately ran into the Chicago Blackhawks, which
right.
That time period, no bueno.
Yeah, nobody was beating
still a good
Blackhawks
trade for the Blues
that time. Yeah, still a good trade for the Blues. And then he would, like I mentioned earlier, he would go on to Anaheim. And again, he would play, a good 5 or 6 years with the Ducks. He was the backup behind John Gibson for a while there, and he played pretty well, in the latter stretches of his career. And he had some Olympic history too, right? Did he win a medal?
Was he the 2010 USA goalie?
I believe it was Jonathan Quick, but 2014 he won silver. And in 2010, he won silver. In 2014, he was in 4th place. I believe in 2010, Jonathan Quick was the starting goaltender. But again, that's an elite tandem. It just goes to show, U.S. goalies, since then, how many have really stood out? Jake Ottinger is one, but Ryan Miller, is one of those guys that's going to stand out in United States history, as one of the best goaltenders to represent in the NHL.
Yeah, and one of the last goalies that has retired recently to finish his career with at least one tie. He literally has one.
Interesting. I'd be interested to know when that game was.
Very good question, although I don't have the time to look that up right now. But 391 wins as a goaltender, a career save percentage of .914 and a career goals against average of 2.64 with 44 shutouts. Pretty good career if I do say so myself, especially with some of the teams that he was on. I would say probably the last 6 or 7 years of his career.
Right. And he was inducted to the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame as well. So again, certainly a very good career and a well-deserved honor by the Buffalo Sabres for one of their greats.
Yep. and just a great American goalie in general.
Absolutely.
All right. So we've basically, I forgot about this. So, so Connor McDavid is is a little good at hockey, right?
I'd say he's pretty good. He's one of the
Yeah,
better players.
just
One
a
of the
little
better
bit.
players in the league, I'd say.
Yeah, just he's a little good. So I looked this up earlier, and he has. We were talking about this for like a week and a half already, but the guy has 40 goals already. It's January. It's January.
He has 41 goals in 50 games. He's at the 92 point mark, a little bit over halfway into the season. I think him eclipsing 160 points this season is not out of the realm of possibility. And if you look at some of the greatest seasons ever in NHL history, you look at Mario Lemieux and Wayne Gretzky, who have 200-point seasons each. And I think Connor McDavid, maybe not this season, might not be on a 200-point pace, as of yet. But I think later in his career, I think he can certainly get there. And he just exemplifies greatness in every single area of his game. And it's just a pleasure to be able to be a hockey fan during this time and to be able to watch him. And again, 92 points in 50 games. It's just unreal. It's unreal, Shades, to look at on a stat page. And for Edmonton, I hope they do right by him, and I hope they do some more winning than they've done since they drafted him.
Yeah, good luck with that, McDavid. He needs it.
Yeah.
But the reason I brought this up, he got his 40th goal of the season on January 21st in the 48th game. There's still 32 games left. The question becomes, does he hit 60? Does he become the fourth player in the salary cap era to score 60 goals?
I think so. If you want me to predict where he ends up, I think he could get to 70 goals this season.
Hey, it's not out of the question. He has 4 goals in his last 5 games. And let's not forget that when Austin Matthews hit his 60-goal season, that he legitimately did have a span. It was either 50 or 51 games where he scored 50 goals. It's just, people got all up in arms about that. Oh, it's not from the beginning of the season. It's still the same span of games, but that's another thing. But
he needs 29 goals in 32 games. I'm not, he has a lot of multi-goal games. He could do it, but I think he's going to go past where Austin Matthews was last year. I think he is the foregone winner of the Hart Trophy already, just 50 games into the season. Unless a big time injury, knock on wood, that doesn't happen. But Connor McDavid, I mean, yeah, he didn't win it last year. He lost out to Austin Matthews, but he's not going to be denied. And nor has Connor McDavid been denied much in his short career here in the NHL.
I would say the most impressive thing in all of this is he just turned 26 on January 13th. He just turned 26, which this is scary how good he is.
It is scary. And it's our version of Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah.
Shades. Like our parents, and people who taught us about hockey, they watched Wayne Gretzky. They got to, learn from him and, see the game, how he saw it and just how talented and how spectacular he was. And Connor McDavid is that way. And he plays with Leon Draisaitl, which makes it even more star-studded of an experience.
Absolutely. And all right. Quick fire answers. Over under 65 goals.
Okay. Over.
Over under 155 points.
Over.
All right.
I think he's gonna go 160 plus.
I'm actually gonna go. I think I'm gonna just for just to be devil's advocate, I will go under 155, but he'll still get 150 and 65 goals. I kind of hope he gets it, but at the same time, I want Ovi to keep that record. So I'm going to go under on that sole basis.
Fair
All
enough.
right.
Fair enough.
And yeah, so moving on. First off, let's give a shout out to Nicklas Backstrom, who came back from double hip surgery and scored his first goal after coming back. So that was that was a rocket too of a snapshot.
Tip my cap to you, sir, for sure. Welcome back.
Yeah, had to bring that up. And here's a fun fact. The Bruins lost 3 in a row. They've lost 3 in a row, but I have a stat before that. The Bruins, in those first 2 losses, lost 2 in a row, the second of which the Panthers scored with 2.4 seconds left to tie it. The Panthers would go on to win that game. They would become the first team all season to beat the Bruins twice, and they would go on to record their first victory in OT this season. They were 0-5 going into that game.
Wow.
Fun
That's
fact.
incredible.
And I'll give you oh God, my buddy just sent me a text of a tweet by someone who shall not be named. And here's a cringe kind of stat where if the Rangers ever did this, I legitimately might have to yell into a pillow. On January 27th, the San Jose Sharks scored an empty net goal to go up 4-2 against the Carolina Hurricanes. They would go on to lose that game. I saw a stat that the San Jose Sharks are the only team in NHL history to do so, score an empty net goal in a game and still lose, and they've done it twice. They've both come in the last 3 years. So you want to talk about terrible. I need to hear your opinion on this.
I'm sorry. One more time. I got a text from my new job and it distracted me. So repeat your question. I apologize.
Oh, no worries. So the San Jose Sharks on January 27th scored an empty net goal against the Carolina Hurricanes to go up 4-2. They would go on to lose that game. And the Sharks have done that for the second time in the last 3 years, according to a stat I saw. And they are the only team in NHL history to do so.
I think that is an absolutely insane stat. I think the fact that it has happened to the same team certainly says something about the San Jose Sharks' ability or inability, for that matter, to finish out and close games. And look, the Carolina Hurricanes, again, I think there was a point this season where the Hurricanes, I'm not entirely sure who they were playing, but they were down 3-0 and they pulled the goaltender with about 5.5 minutes to go. To go. And they scored 3 goals before the end of regulation and they forced overtime and they won the hockey game. So again, as much as that might be a slight on the Sharks, it's also an indication of the Hurricanes, their never give up mentality because they really do play that way. Just unfortunate it happened to the same team. Sorry, Sharks fans. The misery continues.
Yeah, basically all I have to say about that is if you score an empty net goal, you got to hold that lead. There's no excuse.
Yeah. Oh yeah, unless it's scored, with a lot of time remaining.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, most of the time has to be done, and the Sharks just not a very good defensive team. So
no, they are not. So as we always do, let's end this episode on some Rangers talk. So
right.
Johnny Brodzinski got put on waivers, passed through waivers, and yeah, I don't think anybody was picking him up.
I don't think anybody was picking him up either. It was a little bit of a surprise that the Rangers would do that. But again, you got to show some cojones when you go through the waiver wire. Steve Yzerman did it with Alex Nedeljkovic and Jacob Vrana, and players that you might not want to put available for nothing. You have to sometimes, in this roster and cap crunch world that we find ourselves in right now in the NHL. So again, glad Brodzinski is back, and I'm sure the Rangers are too. Chris Drury as well. Not a move I think he wanted to make, just one out of necessity. At least I hope.
Yeah, that's gonna be
Because
a
Brodzinski's been good.
yeah, that's gonna be whether it's a good move or not. We'll see later in the season. Definitely a point to revisit.
For
So
sure.
yeah, so they basically did that to free up some cap space for the constant line shuffling of Gerard Galant, which, in all honesty, is getting to the point of where I'm legitimately aggravated. Uh,
I'm about it too. I'm with you.
yeah. So this is what I wanted to end the episode on. This topic. How many times is he going to flip flop the second and third lines around? How many times is he going to flip flop every single right wing on every single line? The only thing that's been consistent on this team is the defensive pairs and the constant line shuffling when things aren't going well in a game. It's almost like he does it too quickly in games sometimes. Like he'll do it. There's times where I've noticed he's done it like 10 minutes into a game where you got to give it. Actually, no. There was one game in particular where he changed the lines after 5 minutes. I don't remember which game this was, but it was driving me nuts. You got to give players a couple shifts to see if they got it together. You got to
Mhm.
give it more than 5 minutes. If you start juggling the lines 5 minutes into a game, that's just a recipe for disaster. I need to hear your thoughts on this.
And they wonder why these young players aren't developing the way they should. You know why Kravtsov isn't developing the way he should? Because he's either scratched 1 minute or on the second line the next. You know why Lafreniere, Kakko, and Hedel, may not be at the development point yet that you want them to be. Hedel may be, but Kakko and Lafreniere, I don't think they have met expectations yet. Kakko, he doesn't know whether he's playing with Panarin. He doesn't know whether he's playing with Zibanejad. He doesn't know whether he's on the kid line. The only thing that he knows for certain is that he's not a fourth line forward. So if he can't find a consistent spot, same thing for Lafreniere, how can you expect them to develop their games and develop confidence? I said on a previous podcast, with Will, that Lafreniere has a 6.5% shooting percentage this season. In his first 2 years in the league, just for comparison's sake, he was at 17.5%. He's not shooting the puck at all. And you know what that tells me? He's not playing with confidence at all. And you know why he's not playing with confidence? Because he doesn't have consistent line mates. And I think the one thing that Gerard Galant needs to get through his head, and I think finally over these last couple of weeks, he has, don't break up the kids. By any circumstance, do not break up the kids. Because on a team with Artemi Panarin, Mika Zibanejad, Chris Kreider, who scored 50 goals, when those three kids are on a line together, they are the best line on the Rangers every single time. Don't break them up. So if he wants to shuffle lines 1, 3, and 4, fine, whatever. But don't break up the kids. Don't break up Lafreniere, Hedel, and Kakko. They're the only three players that they feel comfortable playing with. And, it's
Another
weird to say. I think that I think that Kreider and Zibanejad and Panarin, they might, and again, I know it sounds weird, they might be too skilled for the kids right now, at this point in their careers. It might be a little bit too fast of a game, and too much puck movement, that those players are trying to do in the offensive zone. You know why they work together? Because Hedel, Lafreniere, and Kakko, they cycle. They do things the right way. Heavy forecheck, cycle the puck, work it back to the point, crash the net, get yourself rebounds, and get yourself in positions for redirects. So, it's just, they just play the best with each other, and Galant shouldn't mess with that.
Yes, and another player that needs to be brought up as well. Sammy Blais is inexplicably in the lineup a lot, and he's currently on a conditioning stint with the Wolfpack, which means that he still counts against the salary cap. They are so scared to lose this guy for no reason. I
I
honestly,
just don't think that worry.
this is
Yeah.
my just 1 second. This is my honest opinion on Blais. If you put him on waivers, he's not getting picked up by a team. That's how bad he's been.
I don't think he's getting picked up by a team either, quite frankly. So that's just where I'm at. And he has 2 goals in 3 games with Hartford, but it's not saying much.
No, it's not. How many players over the years have had good AHL point per game rates, and then it just doesn't translate to the NHL?
Yep, and I just think it's Chris Drury just not wanting to give up, uh, you know, and not wanting to admit that the trade he made with Buchnevich and Blais just wasn't a good one.
Yeah. But it also goes, this is a thing that I have also against Galant. When you have Jimmy Vesey and Barclay Goodrow as your top two right wingers, that's not good. That means you do not
Yeah,
have a very good crop of right wingers. No offense to those guys, but we literally signed Goodrow to be a third/fourth line center, and he's consistently playing in the top six on the right wing. And we signed VC to be a third, fourth line guy. Same thing. He's consistently in either the one or two right wing spot when that spot should be going to a guy that you should be trying to develop in Vitaly Kravtsov, who, by the way, is 23. You
right.
like they've
There's
mishandled
no
him.
there's no question that Barclay Goodrow is not a top six forward. But there's also no question that the Rangers need a top six forward. I think Chris Drury knew before the season started. He definitely knows right now, as we're very close to the trade deadline, that a top six right winger is a necessity for this group. So right now, Shades, the only tangible answer that I can give you is that Barclay Goodrow is a shoe-in right now for Patrick Kane, Vladimir Tarasenko, Timo Meier, whoever it's going to be that comes in at the deadline. He's not going to be in the top six on the right side come playoff time. And for me, that's all that matters. As long as the Rangers are winning games and getting points and making sure they're in playoff position, I could really care less what the lineup looks like right now. Once we're at game one of the playoffs in the opening round, then I care. And again, I just know that Chris Drury looks at this group and sees a Stanley Cup contender and knows that he has to add to it specifically in that area to get to where this team needs to go.
Yeah, the holes on this team are pretty obvious, wouldn't you say?
I would say so. Yeah, I think that they need a depth defenseman, maybe, somebody who can play in the top four and a top line right winger. Again, one of those three guys, Tarasenko, Kane, Meyer, has to be one of those three.
Yeah, it's
That's
just
where I'm at with it.
the constant line changing where I know that this we've looked at lineups and have gone, why is this the starting lineup? How many times have we done that this year? Like 20, 25 times?
Right. Yeah. More than that.
Yeah, no, it's at this point it's concerning. Can Drury make up for it at the trade deadline? After last year's trade deadline, I will stay optimistic. But at the same time, this is a very different offseason. Or excuse me, this is a very different trade deadline from last year's trade deadline because you didn't have key restricted free agents coming to the end of their deal, the entry level deals or bridge deals, like a Philip Hedl or a Keandre Miller. When making deals this trade deadline, Drury is going to have to keep that in mind because it does not look like that they're going to be able to make a Timo Meier sign and trade, or excuse me, trade and sign extension. That I couldn't have said that any worse. I could not have said that any worse. It's not looking like you're gonna trade for a Timo Meier and give him an extension. There we go. Based on just who you have coming up as a restricted free agent this offseason. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. And that's why I think Patrick Kane is probably the most likely choice. The Rangers have been linked to Kane for the longest time. He is a 1 year rental, and I think, look, thank goodness, and I know this is weird to say, but thank goodness Alexis Lafreniere hasn't developed the way that most number one picks develop, because then the Rangers really wouldn't be able to go out and acquire anybody at the trade deadline. The fact that we're only going to have to pay the player $2.5 million, definitely not more than Kakko at most, for his next, little bridge deal into his next long-term contract, that really helps in terms of who the Rangers are able to acquire at the deadline. But I just think I wouldn't acquire Timo Meier because, again, you're not going to extend any of the players you acquire. So I wouldn't acquire Meier because you're not going to have the money to extend him. And for Patrick Kane, he's had an off year this year. I say go for it. He's a UFA. If he really struggles out of the gate with the Rangers and we flop out of the first round, guess what? You leave Kane to the UFA market and you run it back next year and you try again with a different group. But if it does work out and you catch lightning in a bottle, then maybe you can reassess your situation at season's end.
I'm going to counter you on the left point on the sole basis of the Rangers arguably would be in a better position, aka further along in the rebuild, had Lafreniere developed like number one overall picks are supposed to. But that's not what happened. We are where we are with him, and hopefully he signs a cheap bridge deal and takes a major step forward next season. Like I said,
think I've said it on, yeah.
Yeah, actually, no,
Yeah.
you go ahead.
Okay, I think I've said it on previous podcasts, and I'll ask you, Shades. I'm not sure if I asked you last episode, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Who had the better 3-year deal, entry-level deal, performance-wise, in their first 3 years in the league, Lafreniere or Kakko?
That's a very tough question.
For me, it's Kakko. But my point is that you can't pay Lafreniere any more than you're paying Kakko, and you're paying Kakko $2.5 million a year on a bridge deal. So it's just not going to cost you much. But I do see your counter argument that, if Lafreniere had developed a little bit better, we wouldn't find the need for a top 6 forward. But again, he's 19, 20 years old. I think, Ranger fans, especially New York fans, need to have a little bit more patience with these players. Look, Kakko, again, they signed up to a 2-year, $2.5 million contract extension, for his bridge deal. That looks like one of the better $2.5 million value contracts in the league right now.
His cap hit is actually 2.1, even better.
2.1.
Even better.
Isn't that one of the better higher value contracts in the league for a defensive forward, who plays good two-way hockey? I'd say so. And Lafreniere could find himself in that same boat. But if he thinks he's making $5-6 million on a long-term deal, it's just not happening. And the Rangers' long-term cap stability is better for that.
Yeah, like we said, going to be a very interesting and honestly pretty crucial trade deadline because Drury cannot afford to make a big splash and whiff on it, because then that could really set us back next year.
Because he already took one big splash and whiffed on it with the Buchnevich trade. And, I know it's weird to call that a big splash, but, you needed to get, some value back. And I'm sorry, a 2nd-round pick and a top-line AHL player is not good enough. So he needs to prove that he can get good value. And again, he got good value at last year's trade deadline. I don't want to take away anything from Chris Drury. Vetrano and Kopp were instrumental pieces for why the Rangers went as far as they did last year. So hopefully he can find that lightning in a bottle like he did last year.
Yeah, like I said earlier, he's good. Or actually, no, I've said it in previous episodes. He was great during last year's trade deadline. Every other move he made as general manager has somehow found a way to backfire.
Couldn't have said it any better myself.
Yeah. So we're definitely going to revisit this topic because the trade deadline is March 3rd.
I believe so.
I was just talking about this in a group chat the other day, and I also Googled it. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's March 3rd.
Yeah, March 3rd at 3 p.m. We'll definitely revisit this, see what moves have been made. But in the meantime, by the way, the Rangers also signed off of waivers, a waiver claim, Jake Leschyshyn, who for some reason I just started calling lasagna because I thought it was funny.
Yeah, I mean, you could go any sort of ways with his last name. Certainly a funky one with that, but I think he's been pretty good.
Yeah, he hasn't. He's one of those players he hasn't been bad, but at the same time, it's like he hasn't been great. He's kind of just been like a average fourth liner, which isn't terrible.
He's replaceable.
Yeah, he's replaceable, but at the same time, he hasn't been absolutely horrendous, which is very good considering where the Rangers' fourth line's been the last couple of years.
Totally.
Yeah. So, going to be an interesting next couple weeks. But in the meantime, the Rangers are off for quite a bit. let's see. Our
Mhm.
next game, the Rangers' next game is on February 6th, which is a week from today of us currently recording. This episode's going to be out on Tuesday the 31st, so it's going to be a while. So we will be back in probably 2 weeks when we got 4 more games of the Rangers under our belts. And I'm hoping that we don't have to do another emergency recording. I would like to take a week off for once because we've been pumping out episodes left and right this year.
That is true. It's been a lot of content coming your way, and yeah, it's gonna be good to get back at it 2 weeks from now for sure.
Yep. And hopefully, Islanders fall off a cliff. That's just no. I'm just as much as I would enjoy that personally. We'll see what happens.
You and me both.
Yeah. So this has been episode 33 of Pucks and Brews. Hope you enjoyed a drink of choice like I enjoyed my large cold brew from Dunkin'. We're still not sponsored.
And I enjoyed my Dr. Pepper from Wingstop.
Funny enough, I had Wingstop once and I did not like it.
Well, thank you. You're really making me excited for my dinner.
Then again, this was a long time ago. I do want to give them a second shot.
To be
Maybe
fair, I didn't get wings, so I tried the tenders. So we'll see how those are.
see, I tried the wings.
Okay.
Maybe I just caught them on a bad day or a bad location, but I'm willing to give them a second shot.
Totally.
Yeah, and plus
As you should.
I also got just plain old mild wings. So that was probably not the
Boring.
best choice to begin with. Got to get a flavor.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so lastly, condolences to the Hull family for the loss of Bobby Hull earlier this afternoon. Um, and condolences to wrestling the wrestling industry. Jamin Pugh, aka Jay Briscoe, also passed away in a fatal car crash. Unfortunately, AEW did a very good thing in doing the tribute show. Kind of two tribute shows, and we got another one coming. So yeah, that was a real bummer. But I'm just happy we're able to celebrate people's lives. Like just
Yeah,
unfortunately, just not some earlier than they should be celebrated.
for Bobby Hull, not the best person, but a fantastic hockey player,
Yes.
for sure. And for his for what he's done on the ice, we can certainly remember that. And yeah, like you said, condolences to his family. And conversely, Jay Briscoe thought AEW did a great job with their first half of their tribute show for him. I thought the main event was great. And again, just deaths like that happen on a whim and kind of out of nowhere. They hit the hardest. And Jay Briscoe and that entire family has had a big impact on the wrestling industry. And, that will live on, through his legacy for sure.
Yep. And lastly, I would say everybody enjoy the Pro Bowl this weekend for the NFL, but nobody watches it. So, yeah.
So the one guy who's watching the Pro Bowl, who's also watching this,
I mean, have
enjoy.
fun. Have fun.
Indeed.
Yeah. So, yeah, we'll be back in 2 weeks with our next episode, unless, you know, something else happens like the Bo Horvat trade, which woke me the hell up at 5:45 earlier today. So,
Woke everybody up, I think, for sure.
yeah, that's one of those pieces of news where you go from you're awake, but you go from the shock factor just like you're wired for like an hour. So, yeah.
Totally.
Anyway, this has been Pucks and Brews. I'm Mike Sparacino, as always, joined by Liam the Chillmaster Godimer. Hope you enjoyed a drink of choice. And yeah, enjoy the next 2 weeks, everyone. Cheers.